audible function during committee meetings, which I'm doing right now. Members are reminded of the 5-minute rule, and which will be adhered to through this meeting. I'm going to have to rely on our friend Stephanie to help me, our clerk Paparella, who's here with us today. If you need any additional time, please ask questions or make comments. Please request that extra time. So, Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda?
No, through you, Madam Chair, there are no changes today.
Thank you very much. So, may I please have a vote to approve the agenda as mentioned? It's Councillor Jackson, second by Councillor Ferguson. All those in favor, please vote electronically. If you can't, thumbs up or thumbs down. I'll keep an eye. Let me know, Steph. Oh,
yeah, it's up now. Sorry about that. Yeah.
No, it's okay. Stephanie is working from home, folks. She did try for about an hour and a half to get into work and had to be told to turn around. So she's working from home, which has been in itself a bit of an interesting morning, hasn't it?
It has, but we're there. It's carried 5-0.
Thank you. Looking at declarations of interest, would you please wave frantically if you have a declaration of interest? I'm not seeing any, Clerk Pepperella, so we'll move on to the approval of the previous minutes. So it's been moved by Councillor Vanderbeek, seconded by Councillor Nan, that we move and second the minutes of December the 1st, 2021 on the floor. Are there any questions, concerns regarding those minutes? No one's waving frantically, so we're just going to say they were approved. Please vote electronically. So
excuse me, Councillor Vanderbeek, you able to vote?
Did vote. Did you get it?
Oh, it just came in now. Yeah, that's.
Yeah, Stephanie, you sort of chimed out a little bit there too. So maybe you're on.
You.
Yeah, you're freezing up, Steph.
It carries 5-0. Okay, I'm going to shut my camera off. That's probably the problem.
Lovely artwork, though.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. We're on to 4.1 consent items. This is the City Enrichment Fund Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, the EDI Information Report, GRA 21003A, citywide. So it's been moved by Councillor Nan, seconded by Councillor Vanderbeek to put the report on the floor. And I believe, Councillor Nan, you do want to have a motion regarding this matter. But before we do that, does anybody have any questions about the report or any comments about the report before we go to the motion? Just wave frantically, folks, if you have a comment or a question about the report. I see Councillor Nan, this is not your motion yet, right?
Okay, that's correct. I was wondering through you, Chair, if there could be a quick overview given given the details in the report, and that way I don't have to say what staff have already said in the report when I get to the point of introducing the motion.
Good idea. So thank you. Mimi John is with us today. Mimi, are you still with us today? Can you please give us a Cole's notes on that report, please?
Yes, I am. Good afternoon, everybody, and through you, Chair. This report is coming back as a part of a motion by Councillor Nan, speaking to, I'm going to just read it out. We're to come back with a consistent measurement of outcomes and report back to the subtrans committee on what our processes have been so far. We do, with regards to, sorry, I need to start again. Equity, diversity, and inclusion with regards to the City Enrichment Fund. So in 2019, we actually came to the Subgrants Committee with a report looking at how EDI is tied across the fund, what groups were funded. We didn't have specific consistent measurements there. We brought an equity, diversity, and inclusion report last year to the committee after conducting a survey out in the community and getting a significant response from the community, speaking with the community through emails, phone conversations, public surveys, SurveyMonkey Apply. With that, we came to the committee last year with the stats with regards to that, showing that for their progress development need to be done with regards to the City Enrichment Fund. The community was happy with it, but required more an EDI lens with regard to that. And so the report basically says we don't have any consistent measurement across the board. We only have that in community services. That's the only area out of our 6 areas which has in their application a self-identification process with regards to BIPOC, youth, seniors, and that's self-identified. No other part of the fund has that. So essentially, this report is bringing that we don't have that, but we'd like to, we see that there are opportunities for that to come forward as the fund further evolves and develops with the community.
Thank you, Mimi. Counselor, you still have the floor.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the overview, and just wanted to clarify in terms of the report, and I thank you for the report and getting the information back and meeting the direction that committee had sought. As it relates to some of the content regarding the other categories that the grants are allocated to, thinking about arts, thinking about community, culture, heritage, thinking about environment, thinking about sports and active lifestyle. So to date, we haven't been able to, there's no mechanism that enables the municipality to know whether our allocations have gone to equity seeking groups that fulfill those category services, correct?
Correct. We haven't been capturing specific data. Correct.
Yep. And thank you. And then through you, how much generally are we speaking of in terms of allocations that goes to community services and those that are within the remainder of the categories in terms of rough percentage, if that's available?
You're talking about the, through you, Chair, to Councillor Nan, you're talking about the specific allocation of the envelope. It's about roughly 2.1 million.
2.1 million, and of that 2.1 million through you, roughly how much goes in a percentage, rough estimate, to community services in comparison to the remainder of the categories?
Thank you, Mimi.
Sorry?
Sorry, I'm just calling on you.
Yeah, through you, Chair, that's 2.1 out of $6 million.
Out of 6 million. Okay, thank you. I misunderstood that. My appreciations. And so in order to enable us as a municipality to know that, you know, what we've heard consistently in terms of equity, diversity, and inclusion is that it's not just about community work. It's also about, you know, how many artists are being encouraged and supported through this grant, how many cultural priorities in our communities are being supported, led by those from equity-seeking communities, how many sports and lifestyle investments are being supported by this grant. So through you, the mechanism or recommendation would be to update our application process. Is there anything else that we could be doing that would, from staff's perspective, tangibly result in better equity outcomes and deliberations for this committee and allocations?
Mimi?
Through you, Chair, I'll probably have to I'm going to defer to Morgan to probably speak to that.
Actually, my apologies. We probably should have brought Morgan in earlier in this conversation, maybe because you do everything else. So is it all right? We'll just, Councillor Nam, we're going to ask Morgan.
Sure.
So Morgan, if you don't mind, please, we know Mimi very well. If you could just reintroduce yourself again.
Yeah, of course. Morgan Stahl, Director of Government Relations and Community Engagement for the city. Mimi's done a great job thus far. And so I commend her on her work with this program and the evolution of the program and just her leadership during this time, because I think we've experienced some change because of COVID. So appreciate all of her work. But just to add on, perhaps through the chair to Councillor Nan, there are a couple things that we could do in order to ensure that the program is more inclusive and more wide reaching. I immediately think, you know, the the application process right now is only offered in one language. It is only offered online. So we could certainly take that back and take a look at, tactics that we could use to reach different communities that perhaps don't know about the fund right now, and work with them to ensure that they can apply moving forward.
Thank you. And
Thank you,
through you
Councillor.
both, appreciate the responses. So in your consultation and the surveying and the results that came forward, were there any other highlights from the input that you've received to date that you think would be pertinent for a subcommittee to hear as it relates to advancing EDI allocations for this fund?
Morgan?
Through the chair, back to Councillor Nan, one thing that I would add, in addition to capturing the demographics that the organizations serve from kind of a programming and like policy standpoint, would be great, so that there's standardization across the fund. But also, I think capturing the demographics of the leadership in the organizations, because that's something that isn't captured at all in any of the streams right now. So as Mimi stated, in community services, we do capture some of that EDI lens from a demographics of the population served, but we don't in terms of the leadership or staff of the organizations that we're funding. So in order to demonstrate, a better return on investment to council regarding these funds, I think it's important that we begin to capture that data, and that data inform our decision making moving forward. Mimi,
Thank you.
perhaps, is there anything I've left out there?
Just for a minute, I don't see anybody else on the speaker list, which is why I'm allowing Councillor Nan to go over her time. So just to let you know. So Mimi, do you have anything to add?
No, through you, Chair. I just want to add that we've really seen, especially with COVID, I've been in many meetings with different community groups where there's a real push from the community as well, from the EDI standpoint. So this is largely not only staff, community groups are really coming to us and pushing forth this as well, asking for this kind of data to come forward, and to further see the fund evolve and grow and change along with them. So
thank you for that. And thank you, Chair. I didn't realize I was over time. My last comment would be in that last piece that that Mimi just mentioned, the disproportionate impact that we've all witnessed during this pandemic of various factors and how it's impacted the various sectors in our community, from arts to economics, who's able to stay working, who's not, and then the brunt of the work that our cultural and non-cultural organizations have been doing to kind of bridge that gap and make sure needs are being met. I think we're going to continue to see that inequity and that kind of disparity continue to widen as we hopefully come to a close with this pandemic, but see the deep impact in terms of social impact, economic impact, cultural impact, environmental impact that this pandemic has had in ways that are disproportionate across different segments of our community. So I can't think of a better time than now for us as a committee and council to kind of, dig in and do deeper work and make sure that our allocations are going to meet the deepest needs in our community, while also celebrating those organizations that are lifting up and enabling us and our residents to thrive coming out of this pandemic as well. So when it's appropriate, I do have a motion that I seek to table based on the content of this report and based on some of the recommendations coming from community and staff today. Thank you.
Yeah. So any other questions? Councillor Jackson, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Johnson, and nice to see you, Director Stahl and Mimi. Mimi, forgive me, please. I once wrote down many months ago, last time we chatted. What is your official title, please, Mimi?
I'm the Grants and Strategic Partnerships Coordinator at the City of Hamilton.
Coordinator, wonderful. So we'll call you Coordinator. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you for your report. Can I just get clarified, and I'm very supportive of the EDI inclusion, the direction. I just need to get a couple of things clarified here. This reminds me of maybe 20, 25 years ago, Chair Johnson, when accessibility and ensuring for those that had disabilities were not necessarily the norm in terms of programs, services, facilities provided across our city. I'll say over the last 20, 25, 30 years. And then as we legislated it and it became more of policy, then literally those that were providing these services, programs, facilities, they were scoring, if you will, additional points, which helped them, if you will, to eventually garner additional grant supports from different levels of government. So forgive me for the long preamble, but I want to set some context. So with this EDI report, is it staff's intention, and I don't know what Councillor Nan's motion is going to be, but if is it staff's intention that when groups are and organizations are providing EDI inclusion, that they would be eligible for additional funding opportunities. They would be eligible to, in the scoring by staff in terms of through the grants process, that they would have the ability to score higher, which I am all for. So that's question one. Question two after that is, however, I would hope that as groups, hopefully across the city overall, attempt to provide EDI for participants, that those that try but simply do not meet up, if you will, a particular level expectation target, that they're not penalized either. Chair Johnson, if the staff get the essence of my two-part question, please, through you, to either Morgan or Mimi, please.
Well, let's go to them and find out if they have that all straightened out. Go ahead, Morgan. You want to give a stab at this first?
Yeah, of course. So through the chair to Councillor Jackson, right now, I think what is laid out in this information report is that we actually aren't capturing the information of an EDI lens consistently across the fund. So we are capturing it in community services, where I would argue we're doing quite well, and we actually are funding organizations that serve the BIPOC community, women, seniors, and those with disabilities. So out of about 100 applications, you can see in the appendices of these reports that about 55 organizations identified that they serve those communities. And of those 55, we funded 49. So I think when I look at that, you know, as a staff member of the city, that looks like some great numbers, but we are only capturing that in community services right now. So our hope is that we can more consistently capture that information across all of the streams. Whether or not that means we use that information to change scoring or provide a weight, staff have not provided that recommendation yet to council. We're simply stating, let's capture the data in our application intake process and let's see how we're doing. We might be doing great with respect to funding those organizations and funding that work, but unfortunately we don't have the numbers to even compare that right now. So I think our intent is that those serving equity-seeking populations do score well and that we support them. But I think before even staff recommending something like that and a different weighting for those organizations, it's important that we just have the information and have the data to be able to do an assessment. I think that answered your first part. Okay. Did that cover your second part as well? Okay.
I think you did, Director Stahl. An excellent comprehensive answer. I'm deeply grateful for the way you expressed and shared that. So I look at categories, like you said, Tom, I think we're doing well in community services overall, but I look at the other categories, some that I'm actively involved with, sport and active lifestyles, environment, arts. Director Stahl, you're saying we just don't have the information yet on those other categories so that we can do a better assessment. Through you, Chair Johnson, is that what I summarized, heard correctly?
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor. Oh, sorry. You don't want to be a councillor. Go ahead, Morgan.
Yeah, that's correct, Councillor Jackson.
Okay, so again, as we're just at the information stage gathering still, and if that's the essence of what Councillor Nan, her amending motion, will be capturing, I am all for that. I guess I just throw out the little caveat down the road, wherever this might ultimately go. And Director, you've said staff have tons of work still to do to capture the additional information. I just hope with any organizations that ultimately do not have a strong EDI component, in spite of best efforts, that they wouldn't be excluded from potential funding down the road. Those are my comments, Chair Johnson. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And just to remind everybody, 4.1.1 on eScribe is where the motion that Councillor Nan is going to introduce is sitting there waiting for you. So if there's no other speakers, I'm going to go back to Councillor Nan, and then this is a consent item that we're dealing with right now, but Councillor Nan's motion is basically to direct staff to carry it one step further, as Morgan just explained. So go ahead, Councillor Nan.
My pleasure, and it's moved by myself and seconded by you, Chair, that whereas staff were directed to integrate an EDI breakdown of the allocated city enrichment fund in a form that enables consistent measurement of outcomes and reported back today at Grant Subcommittee in the form of this information report. And whereas the city application process does not include self-identification options or questionnaire for applicants to determine or identify whether they are Indigenous, Black, racialized led, women-led, rural-led, or led by other equity-seeking groups. And whereas the current application does not consistently request information about the communities that grant recipients serve, and the only program area which captures and measures some aspects of EDI lens is in the social services stream. And whereas in order to ensure equity, diversity, and inclusion data is being captured consistently across the fund overall, therefore be it resolved, A, that the Director of Government Relations and Community Engagement be directed to incorporate a self-identification tool in the intake application form in all program areas and streams across the City Enrichment Fund, which identifies one, the demographic of population served by the allocated City Enrichment Fund, and two, the demographics of the leadership within the applicant's board of directors and or staff, and B, that the Director of Government Relations and Community Engagement be directed to explore opportunities to enhance the City Enrichment Fund accessibility, such as making the application available in multiple languages, various formats, and outreach tactics in order to better reach equity-seeking communities and report back to the grant subcommittee.
Okay, thank you. And anybody here have any? Oh, sorry, Councillor Nan, only because I think we've explained everything so far. Did you want to speak to it, or can we go to the speakers list, please?
I think all the points have been already made. Thank
Good.
you.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. You're muted, sir. You're still muted.
Is that better?
That's better.
All right. So on part B of the motion, it says that such as making applications available in multiple languages. We have 2 official languages in this country. Is that what you're referring to, or is it more than that?
Through you, Chair, as the mover, the goal would be to seek an opportunity to make the application available in multiple languages. Through this pandemic, we've learned a lot in terms of the demographics and speaking languages in our community, and what has enabled residents to be able to disseminate information, advocate on behalf of each other as residents, and also get the word out. So there are multiple languages that our community speaks. There is an opportunity for that grant application process to be made available in multiple languages and then be translated back for adjudication processes as well. But if I can, through you, if staff wanted to add any more comments, they're welcome to as well.
Councillor Ferguson, you have and I think you've got
Yeah,
the
I just want to follow up. Can I just?
Yep, you've got the chair or the floor.
The floor. Thank you.
Yeah, you got.
So my only concern with that is that there's 2 official languages in the country. And I learned during my time on the Hamilton Police Services Board that there's over 50 languages spoke in Hamilton. So do we have to produce this document in over 50 different languages? And if not, which languages do we need 50 translators to be able to do this conversion over to all the different languages that are spoken in our community?
So how about we go to Morgan, because Morgan, I believe you're just as supportive of this motion. Did you have any thoughts on this, please? How this is going to go logistically?
Yeah, I mean, I think once staff are directed to do this, we will have the opportunity to do some research around it. I don't anticipate that we would have the application in 50 languages available online. I think what would make most sense is that we have a function whereby if organizations want to request the application in another language that is not English, then we make it available to them within the application intake window time frame. It's not, I mean, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn here, but I don't think it's the expectation is to have it in 50
Correct.
different languages, like available at a public library. I think it's more so that we will provide applicants of the information, and they will be able to request it in potentially in another language. When we look at equity seeking groups, and typically the communities that are the most desperate for access to funds like this for the community-based work that they're doing, more often than not, they are communities where English is not their first language. And so in an effort to make this fund more inclusive and accessible, I think offering it in additional languages and having applicants be able to request that would be the desire moving forward.
Thank you,
So,
Councillor.
Margaret, how many applications, how many different languages would you anticipate then?
I think that's a hard question to answer, Councillor Ferguson. I think that, you know, based on the demographics of our community, we would probably anticipate, you know, half a dozen. And our hope is that we are able to support those requests, because right now we don't have a mechanism at all. We offer the application in English, and I'd like to be able to provide a bit more support to community, because these requests are coming from community.
No, listen, I understand the motivation. I think it's very honorable. I'm just trying to think about cost and something that's practical, logistically practical. And it sounds like it's a very subjective answer as to how many different languages we have published. Is it safe to say that the census does identify first language in all the homes, and we could look up, say, the top 5 and make them available in that? Would that be more of an objective measurement?
Morgan, can I just help out here a little bit? I think it's to ask staff to take a look first to see how they would, to find out where they would get the information, and if we do need 5 or 6, or do we only need 3? So go ahead, Morgan. I don't know if I've just interjected maybe, but.
No, through the chair to Councillor Ferguson, I think Councillor Johnson makes a great point there. Unfortunately, I don't have, we haven't done that research yet. So directing staff in order to do that, I think, is our intent, to come back to this committee and let them know what those costs will be. I know that we also, you know, within our council approved budget, there's a $50,000 allotment to the administration of CEF that typically goes back into the reserve on a consistent basis, and we haven't used in the past. So there is a budget built into this fund whereby we could access perhaps translation services or other mechanisms in order to ensure that the community needs are being met on a consistent basis.
Councillor?
Okay, so would you give consideration then to using the census as a way to determine the top 3, 4, 5 languages spoke when you come back with your recommendation?
So part of your research, Morgan, can we say that census would be included?
Certainly, yeah, through the chair to Councillor Ferguson, we could do that.
So we're not approving anything today. We're just asking you to come back to us with a suggestion. Is that, if I interpreted that properly?
Sir. Go ahead, Morgan. That's how you're interpreting, because this motion's directed to you. So could you please answer?
Yeah, through Councillor Johnson to Councillor Ferguson. I was nodding my head, but yes, correct.
Okay, thanks. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. I don't see anybody else waving frantically or looking on the speakers list. So it has been duly moved and seconded. Could you please vote electronically? Stephanie, I hope you're still with us.
I am. Thank you.
Stephanie, process question, please. After we approve this motion, do we also need to receive 4.1?
No, it would actually replace. So when I goes
Correct.
into the report, it would replace.
Thank you.
And that carries 5-0.
Thank you, everyone. And we're on to discussion items now. So I am now going to, just give me a second. I said I didn't have to toggle, but apparently I do. So I believe Monique Garwood is with us today to talk about the City Enrichment Fund update, GRA 22001. To put a mover and a seconder to put the report on the floor, I'm going to ask Councillor Jackson, seconded by Councillor Ferguson, to put the report on the floor. And Monique, good afternoon. Would you like to give us a report on the GRA 22001? Thanks. There you are.
Good afternoon, everyone. The report before you today is asking for approval to transfer the unspent funds from our City Enrichment Fund budget in 2021 to the grant reserve. We had a total of 335 applicants who accessed our funds in 2021. Our budget was just over $6 million. We had 18 recipients, 18 approved recipients who did not collect at all. 14 collected a reduced amount than what was approved, and we had 21 recipients who returned funds from 2020 back into 21. So the total of all of that, and then our unspent administration costs, as you mentioned in just a while ago, unspent, we've had 15,000. So that totals 500,000, just over 500,000 to go back to the reserve. That will bring our reserve balance, if approved, to just over $1.3 million.
Thank you very much, Monique. If I don't see anybody speaking, can I please turn the chair? Oh, sorry, Councillor Jackson.
Go ahead, Chair Johnson. You said you indicated you want to speak first. Go ahead.
Thank you that was very nice of you. So can I turn the chair over, please, to Councillor Nan?
Go ahead, Chair.
So thank you. So the last couple of years during COVID, being the chair of this grants committee, I've been inundated with emails and voicemails from different sectors of our CEF asking for our extra money that we're not spending on people because it's COVID, if that we can direct it towards their category. And so what we've done is for the past 2 years is we've sat back and we've watched and we've done a lot of research on each category and who is really is needing the funds more than any of the others. I think we can all agree that during COVID that our social services is really needing some boosting here. So I'm going to ask for Grace Mader to come forward. And I understand all the others are hurting big time as well. There's the arts community, but I believe with mental health and all the other situations that we've been dealing with on a day-to-day basis, social services has really been hitting the front lines. So I'm going to ask Grace Mader to maybe speak to this just a little bit, and then I'm going to come back with a motion to correlate with the mayor's task force. So go ahead, may I through you, Chair, if we can call on Grace Mader to speak to this, please.
Certainly, cameras on. Go ahead and good afternoon.
Thanks very much. Through you, Madam Chair, Grace Mader, General Manager, City Manager's Office. I appreciate the opportunity, and Councillor Johnson and I have had a couple of conversations along the way. As many of you will recall that through the pandemic period, coming up to almost 2 years now, we've had a number of investments from the provincial government under the Social Services Relief Fund, the SSRF funding, that has been helping to support our shelter system as well as some of our community partners as they stepped up to help the most vulnerable in our community. And as we've worked our way through this, we've now heard from the province in the fall. Hopefully they're reconsidering this stance, but in the fall they talked about how SSRF funding had finished and that we would be looking at how are we going to augment that through other avenues. So we know that many of these community partners are continuing to support those most vulnerable. We're continuing to have the same level of demand in some sectors. We still have a number of seniors particularly that have isolation challenges that we're providing, trying to get food and supports and other resources to them. We also know that over the last number of years, all of your offices have the ongoing challenges of having, as Councillor Johnson said, community groups reach out in different ways to look at how they access funds. During last year's discussion that came to the GIC regarding the neighbor to neighbor request for funds, we really took that away and took the effort to ensure that all those requests had the same avenue. And we really believe that the avenue is through our CEF process, so that each application process has the same kind of level of accountability and scrutiny as those requests come in. So we've had the discussion between myself and Morgan to see about utilizing some of this reserve to assist with this year of transition as community groups try to work their way back to continue some of those levels of supports, but as they transition back into their regular work. So that's been the discussion we've been having. The other part is we've been looking at what other resources maybe be able to tap into to augment that support as well. There's some of our corporate COVID funding. There is the mayor's task force on recovery. So there's other avenues that we're looking to explore as to how we augment that. Thanks very much.
Thank you. And through the chair. So what I'm suggesting at this point in time, and I'm just going to reiterate it verbally, and I don't know if Stephanie, you've got the wording. I'd like to direct staff to utilize the $500,000 of the City Enrichment Fund reserve funds and investigate potential matching opportunities through the city to bring to a total of $1 million in support of communities and organizations that have been heavily impacted by COVID-19 and the pandemic more broadly. Any funds not allocated would be evenly distributed and returned back to their respective reserves. So this would be a one-time deal. This is not something that would happen year after year after year. But given the unique circumstances that we're facing with right now with our social services, I believe that this would be money well spent. It is in our reserve fund. We're not taking any money away from any other organizations that we are granting. And this is not something that's going to be a year-to-year thing. This is just a 1 year, one time only. So I've put it on the floor, and I believe that Councillor Nan is willing to second it. And I'm going to leave the chair with you, Councillor Nan, because I've spoke to it.
Certainly.
Can everybody
Colleagues?
see it on the screen? Sorry.
Yes,
Okay,
thank
good.
you.
Thank you.
Yep, Elsie Paparola, we can see it on the screen. Colleagues, any questions or comments? We have Councillor Jackson on the speakers list.
Thanks, Vice Chair Nan. Can I just, okay, so just to clarify now, if this amending motion is supported, utilizing the $501,000 that Business Administrator Garwood brought to our table today as a recommendation to go into the reserve, that would leave then the original $836,025 still in reserve. Through you, Vice Chair Nan, to the Administrator Garwood, please.
Thank you. Monique?
Through the chair to the councillor. I'm a bit taken aback here with the wording of the motion, only because it's asking for it to be transferred from the reserve funds, and we haven't technically transferred the funds to the reserve as yet. So currently we still have 836,000 in our reserve. We were seeking to add just over 501,000 to the reserve. And so if the will of council is to get the 500,000 reallocated to community services rather than to the reserve fund, then there will be no impact of this transfer to the reserve, other than we would be adding the remainder of 1,044 to the reserve.
Councillor Jackson?
Okay, Monique, I thought my question, okay, was, so basically then where you finished, ... then the original amount in your report that currently is in the reserve of $836,025, that would remain, correct?
Through the chair to the councillor, that is my understanding, that it would remain, and we would add 1,044 from our activities in 21 to that reserve.
Perfect. Thank you, Business Administrator Garwood. That's good. Vice Chair Nan, I have a somewhat of an ancillary question, but it may not be germane to Councillor Johnson's motion. So do you want me to try it and see if it's in order within this discussion, or wait till after this amending motion is voted on?
My apologies, Councillor Jackson. I was interrupted in the background. Can you ask the question one more time?
Sure, no problem. And if it was the junior counselor, fully understood, no problem.
Yeah.
Okay, I was saying that I have an ancillary question about what led to the $501,000 reserves of a lot of groups I'm looking at here that simply didn't utilize approved funds. So I have a question on that aspect, and I'm wondering if you would allow it now, or did you want me to hold it until we dealt with Councillor Johnson's motion?
I will allow it now, as it might help you determine which way you want to vote on this motion. So if I could, through you, sorry, through me, back to staff, if Councillor Jackson's question could be answered, please.
Thank you very much. That was very savvy, Vice Chair Nan, to allow me to do it right now to hopefully get my support. Thank you very much. Okay, so my general question, and Monique, if you can't answer it, I would ask you take this under advisement, please. Here's my concern, and I just need reassurances. It's not a worry. So I see here a lot of groups, Concession Street BIA, for example, simply didn't have their street fest like they have done for 30 years, but the last 2 years couldn't do $8,000 unused as a variance that was approved. I see here Festitalia Corporation only used 12,000 of the 18,000 they had approved. Polish Symphonia Choir, $4,000. They couldn't use any of it because they simply didn't have any events where the choir went. Hamilton Cardinals, Hamilton Hornets Rugby. I've got a number of them here that I'm intimately involved with, that I've advocated for over the years. Here's my question through you, Vice Chair Nan, to Administrator Garwood, or if she could then take it under advisement. The last thing I want is for any of these groups that could not utilize approved funds from 2021, that it would not penalize and or potentially jeopardize their scoring moving forward in future years, because they simply could not hold the event due to COVID. Through you to Vice Chair Nan, Administrator Garwood, can you try that, or is other staff there that could help you with that, please?
I can refer to Mimi as well, but my understanding is that for 2022, we will base the funds based on application and historical amounts that have been awarded to these groups, and not necessarily funds that they have collected for the last 2 years due to COVID. It hasn't been our typical operating environment, and we didn't want to have the groups penalized because of that. So that was my understanding, but I'll refer to Mimi and Morgan if they would like to jump in with additional explanations.
Thank you,
Well, you've
Coordinator
raised
John.
my comfort level, Business Administrator, but yes, if Coordinator John just wants to reaffirm, that'd be wonderful.
Uh, through the chair to you, Councillor Jackson. I mean, as we can see with the past 2 years of COVID, there's a lot of moving parts, and there's still a lot of moving parts. So I would add to what Monique said. I mean, we're especially. I don't like the word penalize, because I'll take out that word. We're working with the groups throughout, as we've been doing, and that goes with this year as well. And I think, if anything, the past 2 years have said, we can't even say anything right now. We don't know what even the next 2 months look like, or the next 3. So we're taking it as it comes. So the only confident thing I can say is that we as staff, we are going to be looking at where we are at, understanding the grant mandate, the guidelines, as council has set, the different circumstances that are coming, where our community is at. I'm already hearing back from community groups who are saying, you know, I didn't do it last year, but I'll do it this year, or vice versa. So we need to take stock of that, and then be able to make a decision. But to your question, we're not looking to penalize anybody. We're looking at the community's best interest in mind and how we move ahead. So, as we've always done.
You know,
Thank you, Coordinator.
Business
Back to you.
Administrator, Vice Chair Nan, just to conclude, Business Administrator Garwood took me to a nice high level Coordinator John brought me down a little bit, but as she concluded, she brought me back up to where Business Administrator Garwood took me. And so I'm really happy with those answers and I'm satisfied. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Sounds like you're riding the waves just right. Elsie Pepperella, please.
Sorry, through Madam Chair. I just reworded the motion slightly. That may work better from Monique's perspective. And I'm sorry, Monique, I just saw it just right before the meeting myself, so I didn't have time to review it. So basically in A, what we would be doing is just referring 1,044 or transferring it to the reserve. And then down below, staff would use 500,000 of the 2021 CEF fund rather than the reserves. I deleted Appendix A because it's not going to be split equally amongst where the 500 was. So there's no point with only 1,000 left. Does that make sense to everybody?
I think so.
Stephanie, if I may,
Yep.
if I may suggest that
Go ahead.
the entire amount be transferred to the reserve, and then the amount in the reserve be earmarked 500,000 once it's all the investigation has been done. And so just to reword it just a wee bit.
Okay. And just to remind Grace and Mimi and the rest
Councillor
of the
Johnson is
contact
taking the full brunt for this one.
brunt of this for not letting me know until a few minutes before the meeting so I could have it prepared. But thank you so much.
But with many
Okay.
thanks to all the staff in the background who are helping make sure that the financial appropriate process is documented. And Elsie Pepperella, of course, thank you. I appreciate on the fly just making these amendments and enabling subcommittee to entertain the motion in a few minutes. So colleagues, just bear with us as we get those changes reflected. And while those changes are occurring, I see that Councillor Ferguson is on the speakers list and second time would be Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just going to add my voice to Stephanie's that I'm really surprised that this will be a walk-on motion when, you know, what's going through my head is that I've sat on this grants committee now for in my 16th year. And every year we have to disappoint people and let them down that we don't have any funds available. Any new people want to come in, they have to come in at a very small amount. And so I was looking forward when I read this motion that we'll be able to get up over $1 million reserve. So when we come out of COVID, these community groups and community services can maybe get a little extra based on that reserve. But here we are spending it already with a walk-on motion that I didn't have time to think about. So I'm with Stephanie that you caught me off guard with this. And I wish we wouldn't do this. There's no notice of motion, no nothing. There's no motion here in front of us. We're just being read out to us at the amendments. But first question is to Grace. Is Grace still on? I don't see her here. Hi, Grace. Grace, you mentioned about the funding that came from the provincial government. And I think it was a huge number that we got from the senior levels of government. I believe it was, maybe I got so many numbers flying around in this job, but it's in the order of almost $100 million. Is that correct?
Through the chair to the councillor, I couldn't say for sure, Councillor Ferguson. I know because a lot of that funding came in different streams. I know
Yes.
that and we had a fair amount come through the SSFR stream, but I know there was a variety of other ones too. So I don't really know what the total amount was. I'm sorry. I can find out though, and we can forward that back.
No, we have the advantage of Mike always summarizing this for us, so we see it quite regularly. Could you just remind me what that acronym stands for, SFR?
Through the chair, my apologies. It's the Social Service Relief Fund. That was the money that.
And how much money did we get from that, from the senior levels of government?
I know in 2020 we had, I think it was about 13 million, and then in 2021 I think it was another, I think it was close to 16 million. And again, as I mentioned though, that is helping to support all of the additional supports that we've put through our shelter system. And we know that one of the reports that came forward at the end of 2021 was showing that we were having a significant pressure as we went into 2022. So we are very much hoping that the provincial government and senior and federal government will also again step up with some additional funding because we are still short on that front.
Right. And of course, the sense we're getting is that this pandemic is running far longer than the two senior levels of government thought it would. We thought it would have been over by Christmas, and therefore they canceled their last fall, canceled anything further. But it's highly likely now that we will. Now, if we start putting $500,000 of our own money into the social service sector, will that impact our ability to be able to get grants from the senior levels of government once they restart them again?
Through the chair, I would not believe that to be the case. I think these are this kind of funding that we were looking at having this directed to would be to help some of those grassroots organizations that stepped in to fill some of those voids during the pandemic. And as I said, they are still continuing to do that. And our pressures within the larger housing system will likely more than more than need all of that funding as it comes down from those senior levels.
Okay, and but we have got $15 million from the senior levels of government. You were saying up to date, and we anticipate more in the future. If what I heard you say.
Through the chair, that's certainly my hope. If I don't have a crystal ball, but I know that we have heard that from from a number of our fellow municipalities going back through our avenues through AMO and OMSA about making that request back to the provincial government for the need for the ongoing supports.
Okay, so and they're suggesting this money go to community services. Is that correct? So it'd be like the Bimbrook Community Services, the Flamborough Community Services, the Ancaster Community Services. Is that what you're thinking of?
So through the chair, I'll defer that question and answer over to Morgan to have her reply to that. I think that'd be the best bet. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Morgan?
Hi, through the chair to Councillor Ferguson. I just wanted to clarify two things. The SSRF funding, the Social Services Relief Fund, comes directly through the provincial government. So it's come in a few rounds to the municipality. And as much as Grace has stated, we've been lobbying the provincial government through OMSA and AMO. We've been told that SSRF funding is dropping down or coming down. Whether that will be repackaged by the provincial government, I'm not entirely sure, given where we're at with.
No, I understand. I understand all that, Morgan.
Yeah.
Traditionally, the Grants Committee funds community services. Is that the intent of this $500,000, providing it's matched by somebody else to go to those groups that are currently on our list for the grants group?
The intent would be, through the chair to Councillor Ferguson, the intent would be for these funds to be available to organizations that have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. So some of those we see in community services. I would say the majority of them are providing social services to communities that have been impacted by COVID and the pandemic more broadly, correct?
Thank you, Director. Councillor Ferguson, your time's
Okay,
coming up.
so just so I'm clear on this, and it would stay within the groups that are currently on our list for the enrichment fund. Yes or no?
No, we would be providing support to one-time funds to organizations that have been, as Grace stated, filling a void and providing services to those that have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. So it would not be a top up to the folks who've already applied through community services. This would run, I think, if we think about it as a parallel and separate stream, and we would use the existing CEF method to ensure that we had an existing adjudication process whereby organizations would apply.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Ferguson, that brings you to your time.
Sorry?
That brings you to your to your 5 minutes as well.
But put me back
Do you
on
want
the
to
list.
make a final question?
No, why don't you put me back on the list?
Okay. Any other colleagues, questions, clarity being sought? We had Councillor Johnson up next, and then Councillor Ferguson, I'll bring you back onto the list.
So first of all, if you're going to blame anybody for walking this on, please point it all towards me, the staff. I encourage them to put something together for us to bring together because this is a bit on the time sensitive. This is a one-time only. This is not to establish new funding for new organizations to carry on for perpetuity. This is just a one-time only, given the circumstances that we have. So my apologies to everyone, but please don't take it out on the staff. I'm the one that came forward and said, we don't know when the next time we're going to be meeting. And I really believe that this is something that needs to be addressed sooner rather than later. But again, one time only. This is for organizations that are doing everything out there in the pandemic that weren't doing it before, but because of the pandemic, they are. And there are others that are doing more programming because of the pandemic, but are not covered for it. So this is why we're putting this together today. So it's a one-time only deal, and my apologies. I'm the first one to say I don't like last minutes, but this one to me was very important and very time sensitive. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Ferguson's next on the speakers list.
Thank you. So it says we're going to have matching funds. And by the way, I'm not blaming anybody. Just the process. I mean, our chair has just correct. She's always big on process. And when the clerks don't even know, how do you expect us to know? And right now, I'm trying to see what the motion says, but I can't because there's nothing here. It has to come down. And I agree it has to come down because I want to see the grid. But are staff to report back to us then on where it's going to be distributed to, or are we delegating this 100% to staff?
So who is on to answer the question? Is it directed towards the mover of the motion or to staff, Councillor Ferguson?
Whoever can answer it.
Okay.
If I may ask a
Director
question.
Stahl? Yeah.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Ferguson, perhaps I can start and then maybe Grace can follow up with anything I've missed. I think the intent would be to figure out where else in the city there's potentially opportunity for matching funds. Is there additional fundings left from SSRF that have gone unallocated that could be matched with this? Is there additional funds in the Mayor's Task Force for Economic Recovery? I know some of the community consultation we did through that process speaks to supporting those who have provided services to community throughout the pandemic. I think the intent would be to identify if there is a source, perhaps internally, that could get us to that $1 million mark, because we know based on community need that we are going to far surpass that $1 million mark in terms of need in order to meet community because of how much the pandemic has had an impact on services. Grace, is there anything I've missed there?
Through the chair, no, I think that was perfect. And I think the process is to, the intent is to follow the process, as Morgan indicated, of CEF. And so the information would come back through the grant subcommittee as to the application, who applied, and the amount allocated to them in a very similar fashion to it as it always has. Thanks.
Okay, Grace, that makes me feel better. So it will come back to us similar to a CEF application, where the application will come to us and then we'll see it before it's dispersed and approve it. Is that what I heard you say, Grace?
Through the chair, yeah, that was the intent of using this CEF format. So we have all of those checks and balances put in place.
Okay, Councillor Ferguson, I also noticed that Elsie Pepperella has her hand up. So just if is it on this, Elsie? Oh,
Yes,
can't
I'm
hear you.
sorry, it is.
No worries.
I'm just working on the motion because there's parts missing while you're speaking. The matching 500,000, was that going to go before the budget process? Since we're in the budget process now, that's $500,000.
I was coming to that next too, Steph. You know, what happens if we aren't able to get the matching funding? Where does it come from? Does it come from donations outside the city, or are you just looking to another department of the city to put in the other $500,000?
I understood it as being surpluses, but my apologies, former General Manager Mader. I don't know what your current title is at the City Manager's office. I'm just going to go with former General Manager Mader. Please go ahead.
Through the chair, it's just general manager. It's I think it's like general manager without portfolio. jokingly aside. So through to Stephanie and to Councillor Ferguson. We're looking at investigating other avenues of funding. As Director Stahl had mentioned, is we really believe that this will far exceed any $1 million in need out in the community based on what we have been funding to date through the different avenues. And we're just looking at, so we were looking to go and investigate some other opportunities and not so much matching, but other opportunities to augment this fund to get to that point. And it would be either, and a couple of the ones we've mentioned, is to look to put potentially the corporate COVID account or to or reserve or to the mayor's economic recovery task force. Thanks.
Okay, because if you know, Grace, we'll get blamed if this goes wrong and go to the wrong places. I mean, the perfect example is Oak Creek. None of us went down and opened that darn valve in the middle of the night, but we're taking the heat for it, big time. And a couple of employees in Public Works did too. But you know, if you read the media, it's all council's fault, and we have a duty to watch over the money. So I'm very comfortable now that you said this will come back to us before any money is spent. I'm a little concerned that you're just going to go to another city department and the whole thing's going to come from the city. But at the end of last year, we were very fortunate to have a $50 million surplus, which Mike came back with recommendations to put it to various funds. And they've been used pretty significantly. But one of them was $20 million for any funding that can't be met for 2022 COVID. So there's $20 million sitting in a reserve for that now. And if that money's sitting there for exactly what you're asking us to do here, why are we taking $500,000 out of our city enrichment fund, which is used to help hundreds of other age groups that also are in need? Why didn't we go there first to get tap into that $20 million if in fact we don't get additional help from the senior levels of government?
Okay, is
I don't
that
know.
to the
Once again,
general
I don't know.
manager
I don't
or
want to put
to?
Grace on the spot. I just, anybody that can answer that question. $20 million is a lot of money that's sitting there in that reserve. And now you want to dip into the city enrichment fund, because I was really looking forward to having that surplus there when things start up again next year to help some people out. And now it's been recommended that we take that away.
So through the chair to the councillor, I think Mimi wanted to answer that question. Thanks.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks.
Through the chair to Councillor Ferguson and the whole committee. Um, just a bit of information. Community services, at the start, I was saying we roughly 2.1 out of the $6 million goes to community services. Our process involves adjudicator scoring, and according to the score, we provide recommended funding so that there's fairness and equality throughout. Now that $2.1 million sounds like a lot, but with the number of funds and the requests that comes through, we go through that pretty fast. So every year, even though in community services, those groups score well, we run out of funds. It's not that they fail their scoring or anything. We run out of funds. Specifically, a lot of times in community services, and we see with the pandemic, every area is affected. Every program area is definitely affected, but community services, when you look at social services, you have funding which is necessary to just kind of get by in the pandemic. And we don't have an emergency fund for that. And this is a grant, the grant program, these applicants apply hoping for that grant money to come. You will see if you go to last year's or year before, groups which scored 80, like they scored 80 or 70 or, they passed, but we merely ran out of funds.
And Mimi, I understand all that, but that's
Yeah.
exactly what I'm concerned about. That's why I want to get the reserve built up in the city enrichment fund, so we don't have to do that in the future. But we're going to give it away now when we have $20 million sitting in a reserve fund for 2022 for COVID-related social services. And so that's my issue. But Madam Chair, I've got to go to another meeting. It's the Ward 12 capital budget process. It started at 2:30. There's a large amount of staff sitting there waiting for me. So I'm going to sign off now. But I got to tell you, I'm terribly uncomfortable with this. Oop, where'd you go? I'm
I just
terribly
put it up so you can see it.
okay.
We're still here. We
I'm
can hear you.
terribly uncomfortable with this, but I'm pleased when Grace says it's going to come back to us. So I now unfortunately have to sign off because I got another big meeting after the Ward 12 Capital Fund that I have to deal with. So thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson, for your questions. Elsie Paparella, do you still have quorum to complete today's meeting?
I believe so. I just have to stop sharing to see who's in there. As long as we have 4, we do. One,
Yep,
two,
we have
three,
4, so
we
we're
do
good.
4.
Okay, thank you. So the motion has been moved and seconded. Colleagues have spoken to it. Elsie Paparella, you wanted to put up the final language before we proceed to
Yes.
vote?
Yeah.
Excellent, thank you.
So A in the report would remain the same, and a new subsection B would be amended or would be added to read as follows. So this is the amendment.
So the revised B is that up to 500,000 of the City Enrichment Fund reserve funds be earmarked to investigate potential matching opportunities throughout the city to bring to a total fund of $1 million in support of communities and organizations that have been heavily impacted by COVID-19 and the pandemic more broadly, with any funds not allocated to be evenly distributed and returned back to their respective reserves and report back to the grant subcommittee. Colleagues, it's before you. And we will move to electronic vote if my colleagues don't have any further questions. Okay.
I'm sorry, who, Councillor Nam, were you the seconder?
I was, yes.
Okay, so this is just on the amendment. Carries 4-0.
Okay, and then on the report amended?
Okay. Same mover and seconder?
Sure.
Okay. There you go.
And with that, I pass the chair back to you, Councillor.
You can keep going. It's just adjournment. Go ahead.
That carried.
No, you get to do it.
So if there's no other further business, anybody would like to speak up now or forever hold your peace, we are going to adjourn. It's been moved by Councillor Jackson, second by Councillor Vanderbeek, that we adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everyone, for all your support today.
Don't go till you vote.
Don't.
Thanks, everybody.
If you vote no, don't go at all.
Yes, because I need a vote.
It's good to see you again, Councillor Jackson.
Didn't I fill in for you in December? Oh, yeah, I already told you that. Yeah, that's right. Okay.
I don't know. That was a month ago.
Have a good afternoon, everybody.
Bye. Thanks, Steph.
You're welcome.